Hi folks, for this week's video I wanted to touch a little bit on motherboards. Motherboards are quite a complex, difficult subject to cover. There's so much detail, so much information that goes into your motherboard. Basically, if you buy an off-the-shelf computer, big box store, you're going to get what they put in it. But that's when you look at different makes and models and lines, so you know what is actually in your computer. One of the major key factors you want to know is, what are your outputs, inputs? What's on your plate on the back of your computer? You have HDMI, you have DisplayPort, VGA. What ports do you have for your video? USB ports. Those are a big factor nowadays. How many USB ports do you want? You need 10? Need 4? Need 2? Well, if you have a keyboard and mouse, that's usually 2. Just for that. You got to remember that. Unless you go with a wireless dongle where you can run the keyboard and mouse off of one, that's 1. So you always have to think of that when you look at the back plate. You have to subtract those 2. Some of them have ports on the front also. This one I have the front plate off, so I can spin it around. This one actually has 2 USB and audio on the front. That may be a factor you might want to look at. If you're looking at maybe video editing, a little bit of gaming, music, streaming, you might want to plug a headset in. You might want that jack in the front. These are just some little factors that I wanted to put out there. Brought up in my memory video before. You have 2 sticks that can go in here. This motherboard is the other design where you have 2 and 2. A color coded, 1 channel, dual channel. You can put 2 memory sticks per channel. Performance differences. How you want to spread out that memory. How much memory. That's the other factor. Just because this has 4 slots of memory does not mean this can handle twice as much memory as this motherboard. These are all factors you need to look at if you're going to buy a motherboard, if you're going to build a computer, if you're going to upgrade your computer. A lot of computers are upgradable if you find the right form factor, find the right same size. You can actually take this motherboard out, pop that out, put a new motherboard in with a new CPU or whatever you want. Sometimes you can even use the same CPU on that other motherboard. Just a different layout, different back plates. The back plate on the back, on a lot of cases, are interchangeable. They pop out. I don't think I have one in front of me, but they pop out. Pop the other one in, you put the motherboard in. Lots of installation videos on motherboards. I don't want to go into installation because they're all a little different due to form factors, due to what jacks you have on there. If you have USB 3, USB 2, the new USB-C, whatever other interfaces you have on that board will change how you install, how you run your wiring, how you want to run your wiring, what kind of case you have too is another factor. If you have those cases with the clear panel on it where you can see in, you might want to hide your wiring, run it clean. Of course, you'd be buying your own custom case at that point. You wouldn't be buying it off the shelf. These are some of the factors I wanted to bring up when you deal with motherboards. You have your memory, your CPU. This is the CPU slot for this one. Depending on the make, model, CPU you buy, they're going to be a little different. If you buy an older one, sockets can be different. I'm not going to tell you this is the standard socket. It depends on the CPU. This is an older motherboard with an older CPU, so it's a different socket. It looks pretty close to the same with the little pins in there that you put the processor in, it holds it down. In here you have your SATA and IED. Now I bet a lot of people out there are going, IED, what's IED? That's old legacy technology. I'll be doing a video on that too coming up. But that's IED. I've shown it in my hard drive video. Head on over, you'll see the drive with the pins, IED. You have your expansion bay slots. Those vary. There's been a lot of variable over the years. PCI 1, PCI 2, PCI times 4, times 8, times 16, etc. VGA type ports. There's all kinds of different ports. There's a newer port on here. You know, for your video card. This was the old slot for video cards. You have your pins, your power pins. Power pins is another major factor when you come to motherboards. Power pin. Power pin. A lot of people don't realize there may be more power pins than you know. This one is usually for your power, for your CPU. You usually have a different one than you have for your motherboard, or vice versa, depending on how the manufacturer designs the board. Sometimes you may even have a third one on there. If you have a higher end motherboard, you may have a third one on there. Depends on how many pins, 16, 12, I believe there was 8, the older design. I believe there was, 8, and you got the 4. You know, those vary. You want to look at that, because if you're changing out a motherboard and you have a 16 pin and a 4 pin, you want to make sure that the board you're getting is 16 pin or 4 pin. But it's not really that major of a deal though, because you can always change your power supply. You may want to do that. If you're upgrading to something with more power, you may decide to upgrade your power supply. So you'd be replacing it. But part of motherboard information, that's really the information you really need to know. You need to know what CPU it supports. It's Intel, older style, pinless. You can see pinless. It's on the socket, the pins. Wanted to show that. That's a factor with motherboards. I know a lot of people don't talk about the CPU or the memory when it comes to motherboards. But over all the years that I've worked on computers, I've found that that is kind of a major thing you want to figure out. Because there's some people that might say, I want this style motherboard with this many ports, I want firewire out, I want this and that and that. But you might not be able to run the new Intel 9, 10,000 speed CPU on that, because the board might not support it. So that's one of the factors you want to look at. You might have to go a little slower. You might have to go to an i7. There's some little things that you might have to look at when you do the motherboards. I don't want to tell you everything's compatible, because you may be able to run that i9 on there, but it might be running at the i7 speeds. This is one of the factors I've seen a lot of, is they're saying there's an i9 in here, but when you really look at the motherboard and you look at what it's doing, it's not running at i9 speeds. It's capable and compatible with an i9, but it doesn't truly work with that. It's running at a certain speed. That's the main thing I see a lot with memory. Memory is really a problem child when you come to your computers. Finding the right memory for the right board is really important. I have videos out on this, compatibility lists, double checking the manufacturer of your board against the manufacturer of your memory, making sure that the board actually says it supports the memory that the manufacturer says will support that. Supporting and running are kind of two completely different things. If you go out and buy a nice board, pay $300-400 for that motherboard, it will probably run anything you throw in it. You can go online, YouTube, you can find people building these computers with mix match memory, like I mentioned in my other videos, and everything else, and it'll run. Well, that's because they bought the expensive boards. But here's the main factor. You go out and you buy this memory at $800 a stick, and it's 1,000 speed bus memory. You put it in that computer or that board, and that board only runs at 300 or 400. So your 1,000 speed memory, or whatever astronomical numbers that they come out with now, they have all kinds of 8 whatever, 9 100, you know, every time I look it's something different every week. So these are just rough numbers to give you to understand what I'm talking about. Is you put that in there, okay, it's running, it's functioning, right? Yeah, but it's running at 300. So you paid, you know, $400 for this memory stick. You could have went out and got one that runs 300 for 60 bucks, 50 bucks. Okay, now you have memory in there running the same speed, it's the same size as the other one, for cheaper. These are things I want to point out, that I don't want you going out spending all kinds of money on stuff unless you're planning on taking that memory out in the future and using it in a new system. Then it may be worth doing that. It might be worth having it for upgradability. But go back and look at technology. If you bought DDR3 or DDR2, let's say DDR2, what are we running right now today? Is that DDR2 that you paid $1,000 a stick for gonna do you any good? No. So these are factors I wanted to bring out. These are things I want to mention. I want to press these things because I know the first laptop I bought, I spent a lot of money on it. It was upgradable, fully upgradable, all this stuff, except for everything that was upgradable, all the ports changed. So it wasn't upgradable anymore. These are one of the factors you find when you're dealing with computer stuff too. SATA. If you have an old computer like this, there's a SATA port on here. Is that what SATA? Can you use this motherboard today the way it is? Yes. I can throw a new SATA drive on here and it's going to run the SATA speed of this SATA port. I know if you watch some other videos, they'll tell you, you know, hey, research what speed your SATA ports are and all this stuff. You know, make sure that you hook it up to the right port and all this stuff. This is another factor I want to bring up. Just because you have SATA on a board does not mean it's SATA 3. Maybe SATA 2. Could even possibly be SATA 1. They run at different speeds. That's a major factor. M.2 has now got 4.3 and 4.4. 4.4 is coming out now. So if you're looking at for gaming, if you're looking out for a lot of other things, high-end, faster, graphics editing, I don't even know about streaming, because what we got out now is pretty fast. You're going to have to really buy a new motherboard with the top of the end processor, top of the end video cards, top of the end everything, I think, to really get that performance where it's at right now. In the future, when that stuff comes down to being the standardized, what's out there, and you can get it for a fair price, and you know you can use it, yeah, it'd be nice. When it's in all these off-the-shelf computers and all this stuff, that would be nice. But right now, a lot of these off-the-shelf computers aren't even coming with SATA drives. So this is some of the factors I wanted to cover. I will have more videos coming, but as for motherboards, these are some of the key factors you want to look at. I wanted to show an actual motherboard so people can actually see it, not inside a case, not, you know. I will do more videos on CPUs. I've already done the memory. Power supplies are kind of a major deal nowadays. Especially on a business end. Depending on what kind of business you're in, what you're doing, that may be a major factor you want to look at while you do this. Because you want to make sure you have enough of a power supply with the right connectors for your motherboard. Along with, if you think you're going to need one of these new video cards out, that you have enough voltage and you have the proper connectors for the video card. Memory wise, I brought it up in the other video. It can be pretty hard to find the exact same memory to go in computers, so you may want to upgrade that. Of course, it'll use more voltage the more memory sticks you put in. These are little factors that you want to make sure that when you do stuff like this, that you account for. In the old days, they used to, I'm sure they probably still do, a lot of custom builders probably still use the mathematics to figure out how big of a power supply you need. But you also want to remember, if you have something where you have future growth possibility, like these, where you have enough slots, there's some computer boards out there that are pretty massive. Servers and other things that you may want to really watch your power supply, because you don't know what you're going to want to put in there. You may decide in the future, especially if you're on the server end or anything like that, you may want to put in like a 10 gig NIC or even something faster, 50 gig NIC, because you're doing video editing or any of those type of things. These are add-ons that you're going to add on to this computer. You want to make sure you have the ports. You want to make sure you have the case that will support it with the slots in the back that you can actually have space to put it. I've seen that in some builds where they have a nice computer motherboard in there, everything in there, and there's 2 or 3 base slots, but there's 6 slots in the motherboard. So even if you wanted to use Some of those other ones, you couldn't because there was no way to use it in the back. So I've seen a lot of weird stuff over the years. Just want to point out some of these points so people are aware. Make sure you hit subscribe down below, hit the bell, get all the updates. So this would be my video on the motherboard. Check it out. I'll have more coming. Thank you.